starting in the early 2000s. And you can see that the amount of money flowing into what's called the Cleantech space is very significant, and the thinking behind investment is reduce the amount of carbon that is being emitted by our energy infrastructure, and we need to look at ways to mitigate this global climate change problem that's happening. And of the things that look promising in the long run to address the issue, solar in the 80s wasn't looking super promising. And I'll show these prices relative to energy technology next, but it's quite expensive, and then declined price a lot in the 80s, and then it sort of flattened in the 90s. The green curve is the real price, or the inflation-adjusted prices for, if you adjust the 2000, the real prices is the orange curve, and then that investment, that really broad clean tech investment, along with dramatic scaling by Europe of the demand and therefore the manufacturing, created sort of a second cost down for solar in the 2000s. This chart shows through 2010, but it continued at that pace, and it has dropped below $2 a watt, which is really significant and gradual. And when this is a bit of a chart, but when you think about how that compares to other technologies, solar on a very different cost trajectory than every other generation technology in the world. And people have started to stand up and take notice. All of the technologies on the top are sort of other low carbon intensity generation, and then the technologies on the bottom, are your natural gas and your coal technologies. And I would sort of, as you think about this, these are the average costs per installed kilowatt of a technology. The actual costs vary by location and by specific instances. So there are many places, even though if you look, it's like solar is much higher price per kilowatt generation technology today in 2015, but in reality, in some locations it's not. In some locations it's the price, but just sort of on the global average, it's still above the mainline fossil generation technologies, but decline much more rapidly than they are projected to. And both of that, people have started to sit up and take notice, and solar, along with wind's more driven because it has, while it is attractive in some places with subsidy, it doesn't have the sort of dramatic cost down potential because the raw materials sort of are they are and cost what they cost. But people need to really increase the amount of solar that is a part of the new capacity additions to the generation fleet in the United States. And you see that happening over the last sort of 5 to 6 years. And having this dramatic cost down in solar that spurs increase in adoption of it are the silicon, which went from, on a spot market over $400 a kilogram in 2008 to below $25 a kilogram today. And the silicon comprises like almost 50% of the bill of materials of the module. And as a result of that, this dramatic reduction price of the main raw material has just the price and it spurred adoption. But you can see the adoption in 2013. It was 30% of the new capacity that was installed, and it's this is just a United States phenomenon. It's in Europe, which led the way with subsidy, and created the conditions that allowed the technology to cost down. But now you can see that it's really starting to grow in Asia Pacific and China and India. And so this, right? This is exactly what we in the first slide we looked at the temperature, and on these slides we said we saw a problem, we invested in a technology, we're costing down a technology, it's totally carbon free. We're on a course to solve the problem, and that's good news, and everybody should be excited about that. There's work to be done, but we are on a path to prove renewable technology to the point where it can be a significant player in the problems with the carbon density of our energy infrastructure. However, the solar day is not like the average daily human use of electricity. If you look at the way energy flows out of a solar panel, it just follows the rise and fall of the sun, and the variation that you see from sort of noon to 7 p.m. here is for clouds going over the solar array. And so, you know, if you think about it, the use case for actually looks more like this, and specifically like the top line, the 2012 line. You've got, you know, use of electricity. This is California's net load, and California in 2012, you can sort of think of as a proxy for the load that people were creating with no or very little solar on the system. And very aggressive renewable targets, and is deploying a tremendous amount of solar energy. And their plan started looking at that and saying, and they looked at the 2013 and 2014 numbers and then projected through 2020 and said, our net looks like the orange line up on top, the 2012, where, you know, use is low at night, but steady. It's not zero. It's, you know, a significant number of gigawatts. But it goes up as people wake up and then go to work, and then it declines as everybody leaves the house and turns off electricity loads at home, and increases again in the afternoon and into evening, and then declines again as people go to sleep. So the top of the variation in the load is really, you know, things that are on and off, and the base load, as you would call it, the stuff that's kind of the 19 gigawatt line here, that's stuff that's on all the time. And what you see if you sort of think about the solar on the previous slide is that as you get more and more solar onto the grid, the node in the middle is going down, down, and down. In a way, that's good because you're reducing the amount of energy that's generated from fossil fuels, but it's really this perverse challenge because you still need to provide energy that's being demanded during the time that the sun isn't available. And what happens is, as you get into 2015 and 2020, create a huge ramp. That's like the 3 p.m. frame up to 7 p.m. You from sort of like a 6 gigawatt, actually right now more like a 4 gigawatt ramp, go from, you know, gigawatts in a 3-hour period to ramping up 14 gigawatts in a 4-hour period. You need more gigawatts of peaking capacity than currently exists in California. So looking at, and this, you could apply this globally. What they're looking at is if we do hit all of our solar goals in California, the perverse result of that is we're also going to have to add 10 gigawatts of some kind of peaking capacity over time. And right now, the peak capacity that we have to add is natural gas. So 10 gigawatts of natural gas production in California. And planning on adding some, but not gigawatts. And, you know, they thought that they were avoiding the need to add this additional peaking capacity. And so, you know, questions started to, you know, emerge. The planners of California said, let's try something else. And so they started planning in 2013, and 6 years ago released a mandate for 1.3 gigawatts of energy storage to be added to the grid. And specifically with the intent of the amount of ramp that needs to happen, decreasing the rapid, the rapid move up that node curve with batteries instead of with new fossil fuel-based generation. It's two purposes. One is we don't want to undo all the work we're doing with this solar by adding new fossil generation, and two, we want to do the same thing that essentially Germany in a lot of ways, but Europe broadly did with solar. We want to fund the massive increase in production of and storage, and to do that with a real market signal for demand. And the types of batteries that you can use today, if you go buy 1.3 gigawatts of energy storage, acid and lithium ion. And these pictures from telecommunications basements, like the backup for a big data center or the backup for a telecommunications hub. And these technologies are in deployment around the world today. They're not super cheap, but they're viable for what California wants to do at lower costs with the massive scale up in demand. But the problem is they're really not designed to be deployed as broad as California is intending, like at the scale that California is talking about, and they're certainly not designed to be deployed, at that times 100, which would sort of correspond with the world. Lead batteries are still good and lead, and it would massively increase the price if you put this much demand pressure on those commodities, the lead commodity. Ion is made. It's pretty broadly available materials, but they have some really toxic components and are really flammable and explosive. The question is, can energy storage, as sort of conceived, they solve this problem at a global scale? I think that there's pretty broad agreement among planners that it's going to be really tough for that to happen. And so, some of those investment dollars went into companies like Aqueon, which were sort of generation technologies, design this energy from the ground up and say, well, if you want to put, gigawatts of energy storage into the ground around the world, it needs to be safe, it needs to be really reliable, and it has to be cost effective. And so when we were designing our batteries, we designed them from scratch, saying we won't design from any material that's not very common and totally toxic. So we had a battery that's very similar to a lithium-ion battery, except that it's made with a salt water-based electrolyte instead of an organic solvent. And it doesn't have any toxic materials in the system. It's got a cotton separator, a carbon anode, and a manganese oxide cathode, which is really similar to dirt. And you could take the battery and open it up and, child play with it. It's clean. It's not toxic materials in any way. And the thinking is that using simple, safe materials means that you're less exposed to commodity thing if going up, if you use a lot of the materials at the gigawatts of scale, and it's much easier to site co-located with large populations. No fire risk, no explosion risk, poisonous gases coming out, et cetera, which are all problems with lead acid, lithium ion, and all the other battery technology that's being proposed. And so this is the way that we talk to our customers about it. This battery, it's going to last a long time, very high cycle life. We're targeting a 20-year asset to be sort of alongside solar and have the uptime performance similar to solar array. It cycles at a partial state of origin, is self-balancing. The acquisition cost is lower than lithium ion, not quite as low as lead acid, but the cycle life more than makes up for the acquisition cost. It's not mobile or explosive, and we expect that we're going to undergo a cradle-to-cradle certification we've done and expect this to be a cradle-to-cradle certified battery in the next couple of weeks. And it's going to be the only battery in the world that can be certified cradle-to-cradle. The cradle certification process includes all the inputs and outputs from our factory. So how materials sourced, what materials are going into the battery, what are the that come out of our factory in waste streams, and looking at the actual life cycle of the battery. Is it recyclable? Is it non-toxic? And nobody really thought that a battery would be cradle to cradle. I would submit to you that a battery must be cradle to cradle in order to be deployed in the hundreds or thousands of gigawatts that will be required to solar on the planet to sort of solve our energy problems. over. Here's some data from test cells that we've deployed. Since testing, we've gotten over 2,000 100% depth of discharge cycles on the batteries. I've gotten thousands of partial state of charge cycles. So they're very, very stable, and we've had great success in the field. We make two form factors. One is for individual households with back, and these go into like an off-grid cabin or a home for energy management where there's solar in the home, and then the module is pallet and to be put into very large systems. And you can see on the bottom a warehouse type of construct. We deploy such systems right now, one in Mexico and one in Hawaii, which I'll show pictures of later. And the way we're thinking about it is that the wind and solar together are going to do to the grid. Right now, absent storage, you have maybe a house or two with solar roof, and then you also can have sort of a solar array centrally located. But with incorporated into the grid, you could change the nature of the game somewhat. You could make it so houses don't need to be connected to the grid. And they can use some storage and some solar in instances where the sunlight isn't good, but in instances where it's broadly available daily solar resource, we can likely reduce the individual's reliance on the grid. And in fact, we're doing that. I'll give an example of it in a minute. Potentially, you could get a situation where we go on the cost curve of the storage technology. We expect that we can reduce the cost that we're using today in order to sell the batteries to less than a fifth by 2020. As we hit those costs, then it starts to make sense to take houses completely off with this type of battery technology. And we're doing that now in high-cost electricity environments. We're doing it in California, we're doing it in Hawaii, we're doing it in the Caribbean, we're doing it in Southeast Asia. We're going right now to places where people are generating electricity with diesel, not the main grid, and we're taking solar plus batteries and saying solar plus batteries is the cost of delivering diesel to your or your location in California. They keep the diesel generator for periods when there's not a lot of sun, but for the most, we can take people that are 100% diesel, take them to 90% solar, 95% solar. Architecture can be used in the world and is particularly attractive in places where existing generation is slim to none, where electrification hasn't happened yet. And people, organizations and governments have the choice on their hands of want to electrify. We're starting to get economic development to the place where we can electrify. Now we need to decide what the architecture of our electrification is going to be. And it can be the same as the architecture of the West, coal and nuclear, or it can be something totally different. And if you think back to that slide that I showed with the different generation technologies over time, you have an electrified, have good solar resource, so is more and more viable as a mainline method of electrification, as opposed to as a sort of secondary niche thing. So the way we're thinking about that is we start with high-end systems. Wealthy individuals, resorts on islands, places that want to be eco-conscious, and that when the cost of our batteries is high relative to what it will be over time, lower than some technologies today, but not low enough to be competitive with that mainline grid yet. That are high end, and then as cost down over the next couple of years, we really broadly deploy in mainstream markets that have cost of electricity. As the cost gets dramatically lower in the 3 to 5 year time frame, reach manufacturing scale, we go to those remote places where new are being built, and the decision about how the new grid is going to be built is going to be driven by the economics of the total landed system. And shipped more than about 2 megawatts of these types of systems around the world. The focus, as you can see, is kind of more in high-end places, but we're also doing demos almost everywhere. And it's driven by the willingness and ability to pay. That will drive where we deploy, and as we get lower and lower costs, we expect to see more penetration around the world. An example system is in California. It's called Redwood Gate Ranch. They have a house that's 2 off the grid and on the Pacific coast. It's a house. They have a diesel generator that's a 30 kilowatt diesel generator, and they were spending $26,000 a year on diesel, and their realized cost was very, very high because it was expensive to deliver the diesel to the site, and the diesel generator was not very efficient. And we were able to offer them, with our HI battery system, a lower price, solar and the existing sort of mainstream battery technology was already much cheaper than doing diesel. So the basic system premise was attractive. They were planning on doing solar, and we were able to, with our battery system, offer them a lower levelized cost and completely sustainable solution. This is what the system looks like. It's 3 of those modules that I mentioned, and standard off-the-shelf components. System that we're doing is, and this is some operational data. The system's been up and running for about 6 months now, and they've reduced their diesel consumption by about 95%. This is a system that's under construction on the island of Hawaii. Now it's much, much larger. It's a farm and a private residence. It's going to be a megawatt batteries. You can see that they're building the building and installing batteries. This is pictures from 2 days ago. But this system is 176 kilowatts. It was previously a 250 kilowatt, and they're going to put solar batteries alongside the propane generators and basically eliminate the use of fossil fuel generation. As I mentioned before, this kind of an architecture is going to be something that, as we scale up and reduce the costs, we're going to, from these sort of high remote systems to broadband on the main grid. So that's kind of a snapshot of what Aqueon's doing and what the technology is. I'm happy to any questions and dive in wherever people would like.
Nick, awesome stuff. A bunch of questions coming in, and again, I want to encourage people to at least to keep them coming. On the system, can you speak to, if someone's look to aware of any maintenance costs, as well as can you also speak to financing opportunities, PE financing getting involved, or any opportunities like that to lower the costs?
Yeah, with respect to the maintenance, worth noting, a typical system uses lead batteries, and they have to be maintained. They need to have maintenance every month, more water to the system over time, and do save other maintenance things. There's maintenance for these batteries. They're sealed, and they're maintenance-free, touch-free. With respect to fencing, that's a really tough challenge for us. The basic story goes like this. An energy asset. Some party that provides financing has to be willing to believe you that the asset is going to function as advertised for the financing. Is typically 10 to 20 years for these energy assets. For large generation assets, for solar it's 20. For a natural gas turbine, it's 50. And this company has been around for 5 years. We've had commercial units in the field now for just over 8 months. And as of today, we do not have financing available. Did a study with Bakken Beach evaluating the bankability of the technology and the bankability of Aqueon, the company. It came back very favorable, and we're starting to engage third parties for financing, but that's going to take time. And I think it's really a function of getting as many of these deployments, like the 2 I described, in the field as possible over the next couple of years to start building up a track record.
And is investigation to, and I imagine so, towards PPA model, a power purchase agreement model, where in essence, or some third party become the energy provider and then sell energy to the, whether it's to the grid or to the consumer?
Yeah, and in most of the deployments that we're doing, these two that I showed are tools that champions of the technology and wanted to give us a place to demonstrate it. But my customers are developers that, like the resort that we're going to do in the Philippines is a developer that is going to sell power to the resort. And they're going to do a large solar array plus batteries plus a diesel generator. And they're going to sell power to the resort over time. And they are providing a PPA. Now, there is more of those PPAs. We really need to be able to apply debt financing to the projects. And that's where it's important that we get the banks on board and understanding our technology so that they're willing to finance it. And I think that's just going to be a process. But we're in conversations with, probably tens of developers around the world, including the major ones in the United States, folks like Solar City and Sunrun and all of the sort of major solar developers that do this PPA model. We're in conversations with them to evaluate and incorporate our batteries into their systems. But that's a process. And until we get, a few years of operation and runtime in place, the majority of the projects are going to be equity financed.
In a few ways, we're leading parallel lives at Aero Farms, and I see this with a lot of clean tech companies. There's a capital intensity, and the equity or the project financing side is so key. We were just able to pull together a financing with Goldman Sachs, but it's that proof of concept, or you're way beyond proof of concept. I guess proving out the longevity is key. It's this could be a way where like further collaboration with members of the World Economic Forum. There's a host of obviously financial as partization where maybe something could come of it. Is there with that? Is there you to the community that could help there?
Be tremendous. I would greatly appreciate an interaction and correspondence with entities that are looking to sort of higher yield, higher risk financing to energy technology. Basically people that are thinking about that, and necessarily in touch with those entities and would greatly benefit from introductions to those people.
So directly first on the phone and on this call, please, do you want to just share your email address so people know how to get in touch with you?
It's Wiley at Aquion-energy.com, AQUION-ENERGY.com.
Excellent. This is incredible. Could you speak to what the culture is like at Aquion and how it kind of fits what you're doing?
A lot like the culture of every group that I met at the Circulars in Davos. These are people that are in a particular industry, in this case energy and battery development, that are really passionate about the underlying challenge represented on the first slide I showed, that has potential to change the world. We have a lot of scientists and engineers that are excited about bringing the first truly sustainable battery to the world. But it's a very mission-driven organization, and it's super exciting and humbling to be able to,
Share, there's a lot of questions coming in. A bunch are specific in nature, so in no particular, I'll just jump to some questions. In cost to the smallest battery today?
How you think about installed cost, but one of those stacks costs $845 US. That's for a 2.4 kilowatt-hour stack. If in that be like a very small off-grid system, and installation cost would be plugged in. Scaling that up, it scales pretty linearly on the battery side. There's a very low cost for adding some monitoring to it, but the cost of the battery depends on the rest of the system architecture too, not just the battery, the cost of the solar and the cost of the motors and whatnot. But if you want to get into specifics, I'm happy to do it. Battery price right now is $845 for one 2.4 kilowatt stack, and like I said, we expect by 2020 that we can cut that by four-fifths.
Wow. So it's not quite law, but not too far off of it.
The difference is the Moore's law happened over a very long period of time. For us, these are specific technology improvements that we already have in the pipeline that we know we can do. It won't continue. I think we'll level off fairly after that. Because what we're now is doing a baseline new lithium-ion chemistry with a water light. And we're applying all of the work that's been done to lithium-ion batteries over the last 20 years in increments. So we have a very clear technology roadmap to do what everybody in lithium-ion has already done to this water-based chemistry. And after the last 20 years of innovation, then we're going to increase in our innovation at the same rate that the rest of the industry will. Lithium materials are lower in cost than lithium-ion are.
You mentioned scale, get the economies down, the economics down. Are those opportunities in scale of manufacturing or in energy? What happens when China enters the picture? Can you speak where the scale or the decrease in cost come down?
Yeah, so there definitely are economies of scale associated with purchasing the raw materials and also the sort of manufacturing processes. But a lot of the cost down is in optimizing the materials for higher energy density for the same big materials, improving and optimizing processes. And about like a series of interlocked electrical processes, and so you have to be really sort of careful when you tweak things that individually will improve it. If I change the temperature that we process a particular powder at, take capacity out of the powder, they have other effects. So we have to sort of introduce the changes in phases. They can't be introduced at the same time. But a bunch of individual improvements that we need to introduce one over the next 5 years into scaling up the manufacturer. So we're sort of saying the cost of that is coming from scale up, and about 2/3 of that is coming from improvements to processing and using better versions of the material.
And China being a major player like they are in solar panels?
Yeah, absolutely do. I mean, frankly, I see China, Korea, and Japan being major players in this market. They're major players in energy storage broadly, and I would assume, be major players in this innovation of the technology. Somebody can figure out. We're the only company commercially producing this chemistry right now. But if somebody figures a way to do it and doesn't have to use the same processing route we do and isn't exposed to our patents, I them to enter this. But it's hard and it takes time. I don't think that will happen fast. And I think that the good maybe first solar. Like nobody scaled up another first solar technology because first we got to massive economies of scale, and so it takes time for people to enter and follow us in the market. But we're looking for partners for manufacturing in China right now, and I think they're always going to be a factor.
Along the lines, like some part of solar has been commoditized, and the money the integrators, like what batteries go in that direction?
Batteries, I think, will go a different direction. I think that they also are going to move toward commodity. Sort of thing is that the people that are going to benefit from that are going to be the lowest cost providers. So while people who have the capability to store a kilowatt hour of electricity are commoditized, the lowest cost provider is going to be able to provide that kilowatt hour of storage capability, at a positive gross margin and at a little price point. So if you've got a technology that's can more than others, then you're in a good spot. It's going to be a really tough market to be in, just like solar.
From a policy perspective, what can governments do to accelerate adoption as well as accelerate our process, the manufacturing process, to evolve faster?
I think that it falls along maybe three key areas. The first one is, having rules in place that allow batteries to be interconnected to the grid. Batteries to be interconnected to the grid, as opposed to make it hard and impossible to do so. Those are just the basic interconnect rules, and then also doing the existing renewables to sort of pay their fair share. In the United States, there's a net metering law that says if you produce more than you use with solar and export it to the grid, sell it on the grid at a real rate. That's everyone installing solar panels and taking their electricity bills to zero and free run on the grid. And that's great. That's a great policy to encourage initial adoption of solar, but in the long run, we need to be creating policies that encourage a system that doesn't have these fundamental flaws represented in that curve that I showed. And to get that in place, I think that it's really important for to have an end over time. And that, I think, would be really helpful. And so about the curve I was talking about, this curve, and it's good up to a point, but we need to set a long-term trajectory to reduce and then remove net metering as an incentive for solar as solar comes down, and we need to create some kind of incentives to scale up the global production of energy storage in a cost-effective way. It's painful. I mean, I would say really, sort of a tremendous burden on incentive the consumption of solar, and therefore, create a big global producers. And what we've seen is, in the last 5 years, a 90% drop in the price of a panel. That really changing the game for how to deploy that technology. It's a similar move, and right now California is, but that's not enough. Last thing I would say is I think we need government to stem and support financing while this technology is nascent. I'm talking about new early-age technology development. I'm talking about project financing, similar to the guarantee program for the Department of Energy. That was a widely panned United States Department of Energy program to guarantee loans for risky technology. But the reality is, if we want to get these technologies out and in broad deployment, we're going to need to prime the pump. It's going to be expensive and it's going to be hard, but it's really helpful to do it.
part to introduce some of your work with Al Gore, and with that is when you think of what's going to happen in Paris, is a carbon tax, does that go far, like enough to get all of these other pieces in place to move the whole, or do you need some more specific language, whether it's integrating to the grid or in this financing for these renewables or batteries? How does that relate to your work with Gore?
So what we're doing with Gore, the Climate Reality Project, and which I would invite anybody who's on the call who would like to help or is interested in participating to join. Again, we'll be reaching out to the whole YGL community shortly with this initiative, but we are the business community globally to in Paris this year to the specific actionable change in the form of policy. And the approach that we're taking, Climate Reality Project are producing a feature publicity event in June, which is the Live Earth concert series. So it's going to be 7 concerts on 7 continents. And phase 1 is to get businesses sign up for to be affiliate partners, just publicity partners for Live Earth concert series. And publicity, publicize it, and then in turn have their name on the list, people to see action on climate change, organizations that want to see action on climate change at the COP meeting in Paris in December. It's pretty lukewarm. There's not like a specific call to action in Live Earth messaging. It's more of a we want to see change type of a message. But 2 of the YGL initiative with Gore is to get first a lot of people to sign up to support Live Earth, and then talk to a subset about signing an agreement that has more teeth, like a specific call for something concrete, deliver to the talks, a press release and an announcement of a more detailed agreement saying exactly what we would like to see, and sort of harness the voice of the business community and collective message asking for specifics. And on carbon, whether that is a carbon tax or some other mechanism, is the most important thing that we could do to facilitate the development of the technologies that we need to address this problem. Externality is not being priced, and even if we don't price it right, if we price it, it's going to accelerate the development already happening of these technologies, and it's going to make everything else easier.
And Ted, if there's a way, let's figure out get your email address out to everybody again. Just make sure that and see how to get back in touch with you. Jump back to the technology side. You talk about cradle to cradle. A part of that is recycling. How the materials after the end of the useful life, what happens to the materials as well, the process of either collecting them and where do they end up going?
The first phase of this was design a battery that is completely toxic. The phase is going to be to design a battery that's completely non-toxic and easy to recycle. Materials at end of life, like at the end of the battery, the one thing in the battery that seems to be damaged beyond repair is the current collectors. They corrode over time, and that sort of sets the life of the battery. And what we're seeing as a battery maker is that corrosion. So the longer the current collector to last, the longer the life of the battery is at the end of the day. The rest of the stuff is completely reusable, the carbon manganese oxide. So what we're looking at is technology that was referenced earlier, circular economy call. It's making circuit boards reusable and disassemblable by taking, using a glue that comes apart at higher temperature and the battery and the case so that it's sealed with the glue and can be easily unsealed, and we can use the material. That's sort of our cradle-to-cradle process and a Wave 3 technology, something that we expect to be introducing in 2016. The goal is to make not only the most sustainable battery in the world, but also the most recyclable battery in the world, so that these materials can continue sort of in line with the circular economy principles.
That touches on a part of circular economy, cradle to cradle, that's often unappreciated, which is intention and ambition. And calling out one's intention and then monitoring it and see how it goes. So, bravo for putting it high. It's a great ambition. How about how small can these go? We use our phones and tablets and personal computers. Can this sort of innovation be scaled down to that size? It's not much that you can't make the batteries small. The smallest ones we've made are about the size of a quarter or a coin. It's that the materials don't hold as much energy as a standard lithium battery. We have, for the same amount of space, we can discharge about half of the lithium-ion battery. In some cases, like a third. But we expect to get to about half at the sort of best use of the materials. So in that in your head and say, what if my iPhone was twice as thick? And it's for consumer electronics and portables. This is the technology. I think that for people who don't care about size and weight, which is the stationary technology, the best battery in the world. People that are for applications where size and weight are really a concern, I think it'd be much harder to get in and change the paradigm. But it absolutely could. It just like I said, it would be used much bigger, same performance. Okay. And along the technology spec side is heat management. We always touch back and they seem to generate a lot of heat. Is there anything unique or different about Aquion's batteries versus other batteries? Or is it managed?
Heat is an issue with all batteries because it's not all, but batteries because our temperature regime outside of some window, different reactions occur, and they occur at different rates. So if you are too hot, they degrade really, really fast. All those long cycle life charts that I show you, they crack in 200 or 300 cycles. The range for this battery is pretty good. It's from 5 degrees Celsius to about 40 degrees Celsius. So in ambient temperature conditions, in most of the world, this is a good battery. And even in really hot places where it gets 55 or 60 degrees Celsius, it's not 55 on a rolling 24 average. It's 55 a couple hours. So if they're shaded and they have a forced air system like a fan, on the rolling 24-hour average, it's pretty easy to keep them below 40 degrees in most places. So heat, it's not a killer for us, but it is something we need to be aware of and manage for sure. Well, we're coming up to the top of the hour. If you could shout out your email address one more time, because there were a couple specific follow-ups that the YGL community, it seems like we could really get behind some of your initiatives to make sure everyone has your contact info. Sure. Email is t.ley@aquion-energy.com. AQUION-ERGY.com. Well, thank you so much, Ted. Very illuminating, energizing, if you will. And we're excited for the future of Aquion and the planet. Innovators like yourselves, entrepreneurs like yourself,
that us and kind of more confidence in the future. Of course, a lot of work, and wherever the YGL community could help, hopefully we could all come together and help out in different ways. Members reach out, as well as other sector opportunities for the YGL community. If other people know others that would be good, where there's be inspiring to other members of the YGL community, circular economy community, please let us know. Thanks, everyone. Have a good day. Bye-bye.
Thanks, Nate.
Thank you, Ted and Dave, for hosting that session. Just quickly before everyone logs off, there's 2 speaker series coming up, one on April 7th with founder of Method, and one on May 6th with Christian Lang, the CEO and chairman of TradeShift. Thank you very much again, Ted, for the insightful presentation, and David for the Q&A, and look forward to having everyone on our next speaker series call.